Okay.
What's the matter? Say welcome back. Say it.
Welcome back.
Today, we are going to
do some stuff.
Rebuild the front suspension on this 64 Plymouth Fury 9-passenger wagon. Let's get to it.
9? Like 3 people in the front? That seems a little dangerous. I don't think I'd do that.
Yeah, 3 people in the front, 3 people
in the back, and 3
in the
people
back,
on the way back.
And 3 people in the way back.
That seems a little tight.
There must be 3 kids. This is where you throw your kids because you don't care that they're going to fly out the back.
That makes sense.
There's no seatbelts. That's how they discipline children. All right, let's get to it. Stop messing around. Got the car up on jack stands. I usually put 2 midway and 2 in the front because once it's on the ones in the center of the car, the front just wants to droop down unibody. So, and this car is extremely heavy. My lovely assistant is gonna take the wheel off. Ready, Muscles? For a spring, Chrysler did what's called a torsion bar. So there's a bar that goes into the lower control arm that goes back into the frame. So instead of having a coil spring, right, like a spring,
yeah,
they unwind it and make it straight.
Straight spring?
Straight spring. So it still holds tension because it resists the twisting. Thinking about taking the upper control arm off first.
Okay.
And putting the new ones on because I'm not replacing this, but it's going to be unbolted from the top and bottom, and with the brake line I don't want it just hanging in space.
And what's causing the wheels to be wonky? Like which part? Or just the whole suspension?
Basically the whole thing, but there's bushings here and here, and you can see there's really no bushing left there.
Yeah.
And the same on the bottom. When we get it apart, you'll see there's just, and the ball, these are ball joints, so they have to flex. So when this goes up and down, this joint flexes, like it can move around.
Okay.
But when the rubber goes bad and the joint goes bad,
looks like it's bad.
it's real bad.
Stop turning the light off. What the heck? Okay, let's get started. It's getting dark out.
Yeah, well, we have light.
Keep turning it off.
So we'll take the cotter pin out, and you can use your newfound muscles and take the nut off.
Okay, so it's actually not moving.
Pull with all your might.
I feel like I'm gonna break something, like a ligament. Oh, there we go.
Wow.
It's just the position.
Muscles.
Is it off?
No, you gotta take the whole nut off.
Oh.
Yeah, don't scratch it. See, you can take it off your finger. Take this socket off. Yeah, use your finger. Look at that. We're making progress. Now, if we were gonna try to save this ball joint, we wouldn't hit this with a hammer.
Okay, should I move away?
No, you're gonna hit this with a hammer.
Oh.
To knock it out. Hit the side of this.
Oh my god. I need an intermission here.
I have a fork.
Right.
I have a fork thing to pop them loose, but there you go. Get angry. Don't be afraid. We're not reusing it, so you can mash it. Hit it like you hate it.
Oh my god. I'm hating it.
Here, let me try it once or twice. That did it.
So it was a strength issue.
We'll be taking the whole steering out, so we don't even need to take it apart. Isn't that good news?
It's the best news I've ever heard, actually.
Oh my god, look at that. You can really see that there's no bushing there whatsoever. See just the metal?
Yeah, I see the metal, yeah. So what are you doing now?
I'm taking off the upper control arm. So I want to take the upper A-arm off and put the new one in. And that way, that'll support this hub. So I don't have to undo the brakes or hang it off, you know, like a giant zip tie or something stupid like that. I remember when I took these off on the Valiant, they made the most horrible, worst sound ever.
So we're gonna be like a scream or something?
Yeah. Oh, it went.
Oh.
It's not a ratchet.
Oh.
That went.
No sound? No horrendous noise?
Okay, now it's not cooperating. I have a feeling it's gonna break, which I'm okay with, but I'd rather have it break sooner than later. Go on, muscles.
Figured if I give it more effort and enthusiasm.
Yeah, there it is. Got it.
Woohoo!
Somebody needs to invent a cotter pin puller.
You can be that person.
I can?
You can do anything you want to in this life.
You're so inspiring.
I know.
I ain't never seen one do that.
Do what?
It's like expanding. Oh, mosquito.
No. I hate them. I can never tell when I'm being bit either.
Alright, listen for them.
Okay. I don't have a good enough hearing for that then. I'll just wake up and then there's like 50 on my arm.
50 mosquitoes?
50.
50 mosquitoes?
Yeah.
What are 50 mosquitoes?
They're 50 mosquitoes.
Yeah, that just came right off.
Look at that. Look at that.
Nice and greasy.
Is that a play on words?
Greasy? I
Yeah.
thought that was the word.
What?
Greasy.
Am I saying greasy?
Greasy.
What are you saying?
Greasy. Grease?
It did not sound like greasy. It
It's
sounded like...
greasy.
Yeah, you're saying greasy.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how we talk around these parts.
Oh, I didn't realize we were keeping it going.
I'm all greasy myself.
Oh no!
What?
There's rust.
So you leave the nut on. Now we're gonna break the ball joint.
Break the ball joint.
Break the ball joint loose.
How do we do that?
Take this here fork.
That is a fork.
There's a fork.
Mini pitchfork.
The lighting here is terrible.
Yeah, it is.
You want to handle this here hammer? You think you got it in you?
Which way?
That way.
Hit it in?
Mm-hmm.
Oh god. I can try.
Use all your might.
Okay, well it's not a lot, so.
Make sure you hit it.
That's what I did.
Usually, so you hold it with one hand and hit it with the other, but I don't know if you're capable.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
I'm not holding it.
So it's not supposed to move like that? Here, why don't you do this part?
Okay. This is a nice attempt. Oh.
I just don't want anyone getting hurt. Whoa, oh my god.
Did you hear it pop?
Yeah, I did. I did.
Good thing I left that nut on there. Now it's all greasy. Got my fork greasy.
Oh no.
That's not even close. I don't know what that was. Where are you from?
Yeah. Okay, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. I'll have to play that back and listen to it.
I'm from Oklahoma.
See if I can figure out what dialect that was.
Yeah. We'll just have to figure it out. Because it was a dialect.
It was a dialect.
It was.
Yes.
Okay, what's next?
Support the lower control arm so I can take off the upper one. This lighting is terrible.
Especially when that happens.
Especially when it's non-existent.
What time do you think it is?
You got your phone running?
No.
Why not?
Because it was charging. I just want to make sure we order those movie tickets
Before it's time to order the movie ticket.
I've never used
Fandango?
a Fandango gift card before. We're going to go see Wolverine and Deadpool movie. Are you pumped?
Yeah.
What?
Are you?
Well, I don't really know what to expect.
It's free.
Yeah.
The price is right.
I saw Twisters today.
How was that?
Good. It was really good.
Really good?
I'm still thinking about it.
Oh yeah?
I liked it.
I don't know what's going to happen here when this comes off. I hope no one gets injured.
What are you saying?
Well, I supported the lower control arm, so everything should be good. My plan's working out.
Oh, this is a first. I'm just kidding.
You're just kidding because you're
just
funny. So that's my big idea. Replace the upper, put it back on. And that way I don't have to disconnect this. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, now getting this upper control arm out is going to be a pain right in the butt. It's a couple days later. I came out here the other night and made some additional progress. I loosened all the bolts that need to come off. So the lower control arm bolt, I loosened the lower ball joint bolts, which both of these took a breaker bar with a jack handle and me standing on it to get these free. And I removed the end links of the steering, and both strut bar bolts didn't want to come off. So I put a wrench on it and put a jack under the one end of the wrench and just jacked up the wrench until they broke free. This one was spinning. I've never had it where it actually spins in the lower control arm. Usually this is like rusted, welded. And even with a breaker bar in the end, it was still spinning because it was loosening the nut on this side. So I ended up putting vice grips on this and then using another pair of vice grips to tighten the vice grip lock nut, and that worked. I even had this at one point, a jack stand under this, and I lowered the car down on it and it bent it, and even with the weight of the car on this bent, it was still spinning. And the other night I was talking about how someone needs to invent a tool to remove cotter pins, and when I came out here last night I instinctively just grabbed these and just started removing the cotter pins. You don't even have to bend the other end, you just grab the side that needs to come out and you just leverage it back and forth and it comes right out. So I don't know what I was thinking. These are the front splash guards, which are upside down. They mount to the frame. I've actually had people tell me that Mopar never made metal splash guards, but this is the third car I've had with them, so I'm pretty sure they installed them from the factory. What I've never seen before is a rear splash guard that runs from the lower control arm all the way down to here. So I checked the other side. There isn't one on the other side, but there's remnants of screws in the frame and a mark where one once was. So apparently some of these came with metal splash guards in the rear. Now this had the rubber splash guard here, but no other splash guard or even remnants in the front here as far as rubber. And this is where the metal one would have been. On the passenger side, this rubber splash guard is missing, but there's a rubber one here up front, which is odd. The other one doesn't have it, and it doesn't even have like remnants of where one was. So I'm continuing my plan with mounting the upper control arm, the new one, hooking it to the spindle, and then removing everything below the spindle so I can keep this brake drum in place. I don't have to bleed the brakes. But just like the rear, I think I'm gonna take some time and scrape off as much undercoating as I can. A lot of it's just covered with dirt and rust. On the rear, I actually got, I think it was like 25 pounds of undercoating off. I don't think it's going to be the same up front, but we'll make an attempt. So here we have the metal splash shield that's bolted to the firewall. It's pretty rusted, but it still has the rubber gasket in between the fender and the splash shield. In the front, the rubber gasket's kind of falling out, but the splash shield looks like it's in good shape. Plenty of undercoating on there. Driver's side, the rear splash shield is pretty wasted. And the front, it's pretty much rusted in half. So maybe we can find some splash shields in the future, because this car does get driven. I'll probably rust-proof what I call the bathtub here, the top of the frame. Of course, I found the typical shoddy bodywork here on the fenders. This one has a couple welding sticks sticking through. I'm a little dirty, and I made a giant mess. But I got all the loose undercoating off that had dirt stuck in it. That splash shield is shot. Inner fender and fender look good. And that splash shield is shot. Passenger side was a different story entirely. All of the undercoating, it seemed pretty thin to start, and it was all full of dirt, but it just kind of fell off as I ran the scraper across it. This splash shield looks good. It's areas like this that I was looking out for, where it looked like the undercoating was stuck to the metal and no issues, and then I noticed like a bubble up here, and it was obviously filling up with moisture, water, dirt, debris, everything. So I had to dig it out all the way down so the water can drain. This isn't good. The splash shield is shot, but this rust right here is the actual firewall. And there's a hole in it. So that's a problem for another day. Discovered here as well, the undercoating was painted over. For some reason it ran over this exterior fender bolt. You can still see some of it's painted. This is a patch. That's a nice grouping of weld. You play a tune on that. So I'm replacing the steering box. In order to get the steering box out, you need to pull the column away from the steering box. And the factory service manual states to loosen this collar so there's enough play to pull the column back. But mine also has this bracket. So this is holding it to the dash. There's some brackets behind the dash. And it wouldn't move. And then I realized this clamp is wrapped around the steering column, and there's like a tab on a bracket above it that it's looped around. Strange. So here's the picture. There's the clamp. It doesn't show any other clamp. Loosen column jacket. Blah blah blah. Sufficient to engage the tab and clamp is from the slot in the column jacket. Now possible to slide the column somewhat up and away from the steering gear. But it doesn't picture that second clamp that I have. It also states the floor plate to leave it alone because it keeps the column aligned. So now all I have to do, allegedly, is push the column back off the steering gear. I'm just gonna see if I can pull it away a little farther. And done. Now I just need to get the lower control arm off and slide that torsion bar back, and hopefully this thing clears the header. The plan is to take the lower two ball joint bolts out and separate the lower control arm, and then remove it with the torsion bar. I don't have a torsion bar remover, but I never had a problem when taking out the lower control arm with the torsion bar pushing through. Let's get a little more leverage. This bolt is definitely stuck in the K-frame because the destroyed bushing is moving and the torsion bar is moving. The bolt is not moving. Needed to move the camera to get a good swing on it, and made a nice pop. There we go. How much dirt is in this lower control arm? That's a lot of crud. And that bushing is shot. It's missing chunks. And these split in half and shrunk up. Well, with the old. So I disconnected the hoses up top. The factory service manual states to remove the starter, but my starter is, you can barely see it. It's behind the headers there. It's a mini starter. So I don't think the starter is going to be the problem. It looks like it might just tip down and fall right out. So I think I'm going to try that method. Just unbolt it and let it fall out. Because I'm not reusing it and it's not in good shape. Should I try to put the jack under it and do like a controlled demolition here? Alright, let's see what happens. If I put the jack on it, I think it'll make it kind of want to come, I don't know. Decisions. Okay. The header's in the way. I have an idea. So I removed the valve thing from the top of the power steering pump. Let's see if that gives me enough clearance there. This thing's been leaking like a sieve for a very long time. It's closer. I don't think that's coming out. Motor mount unbolted, piece of wood on the side of the oil pan right against the engine. Let's see if this does anything. The engine's up. Will that be enough? Stay tuned. The light right in my face. Good. Holy crud. Okay, that's a victory. Let's get it cleaned up here. That's pretty high. Okay, I'm going to make an attempt to put the new one in. I've been planning on hating doing this for weeks, so it'd be nice to get it over. That's the valve part. I took off on the old one to get it out, but I'm not so sure I needed to take it off, so I'm going to leave it on for now. So it's nice and light. Okay, that was easier than expected. I'm must know what I'm doing. Success. It seemed to fit kind of strange, but it's lined up with the steering shaft. Let's bolt this sucker down. Now that the steering box is in, there's a single keyway on this that has to line up with the steering shaft. You can probably see it better on the old one where there's a single keyway in the center here where there's no splines. So I have to line those up so I can actually push the shaft back on. So I just went in and pushed on the steering wheel and the column, moving it back and forth. You want this to go on smoothly because if you miss that keyway, you're going to mess up the splines on either the shaft or the steering box. So if it doesn't go on like butter, it's not right. And luckily where this bolt goes through, there's that divot that holds the column to the pump. And there's a little bit of thread, so you can kind of get an idea, you know, where you're at without destroying the whole shaft. Took a little persuasion to get this bolt in, but we're there. So column's bolted down. I just got to bolt it down in the interior. Just an FYI, I got this steering box from Norm's Speed Shop. He is located in North Carolina. The great thing about this place is they have quality parts, and when you call, Norm actually answers the phone. So this kit was a non-numbers matching power steering, so there's no numbers on it to indicate, you know, it's a 64. It just fits a variety of B bodies, which was a little cheaper, and it comes with the pitman arm. So the ones that are numbers matching don't come with the pitman arm. I think they're the same price. So because I don't care about numbers matching, I went with this one. I get the pitman arm. Unfortunately, the idler arm is non-existent, and if you find one, it's NOS and it's ridiculous amounts of money. If you order one online, you get the wrong one. Power steering's back in. I got the high pressure hose hooked up and the low pressure. I noticed on the low pressure I had the old style clamp above a newer clamp, and if I recall correctly, it was leaking. I know it's low pressure, and as you see I have the old style clamp on the pump, but I think it was leaking, and if I recall correctly, this size of hose is like non-existent, because that's the original one. So I just replaced it with a regular one. I don't have anything against these clamps. I even have like the tool to take them on and off, but the edge was so frayed, I think that's why it was leaking. And since I couldn't find a replacement, and this was kind of short, I didn't want to cut it. So there it is. So here we go. This is what we're replacing the stock suspension with. We've got QA1 upper and lower control arms and new QA1 torsion bar adjusters. These uppers require a silicone grease in these, and this takes regular grease. It's just a new ball joint. I went with Pro-Forged ball joints, steering joints, lower ball joint right here. They come painted. Cotter pin nut, everything. Nice quality. I believe this is Pro-Forged 2. This is the upper control arm adjusters. And then the strut rod, which is QA1. So the plan is replace the upper control arm to hold the brake backing plate, spindle, and then remove the lower stuff and get that out of here. So I've already painted up in here the bathtub of the frame. It's solid, it's just a little rusty. So first things first, upper control arm. Sometimes these will slide right in, sometimes they don't. Most of the time they don't. I know on the A bodies you have to trim like part of the frame. Little WD. I'll coax this in here. I always replace those upper control arm adjuster bolts because I've had them break on me before when they look fine or reusable. So I cheated and already loosened like all the bolts, strut rod, lower ball joint, all that stuff. So if I do it all at the same time, I don't have to get out additional tools and breaker bars and all that. So now I can just zip these off. Now I have my hub and upper control arm separated from the lower suspension, the whole thing. I can just pull off the whole bottom. Done. That bottom ball joint is completely shot. I bet you this bushing is toast. Look how uncentered this pin is in this bushing. I mean, it probably just wobbles around here like crazy. And we already looked at the uppers. They're just completely shot. People fix these, you know, rebuild them. You gotta push out the ring that holds the bushing. Sometimes they weld plates to the bottom here. But I drive this car. I want to be able to have it point down the road completely straight and not worry about it ever again. So I have a way of torquing these so I can get to all these bolts. First I'll do the upper control arm ball joint, then I'll do the lower ball joint to the lower control arm, and then I'll do the lower ball joint to the backing plate. And then you do the pivot on the lower control arm when the car is at ride height, or at least the suspension is, you know, on the ground or on a jack to make it easier to get to it. And I'll do the strut rod in between there somewhere. Lower control arm's ready. I put some grease in there where the torsion bar goes. I don't know if I read it in the manual or someone said, hey stupid, you need to do that, or I just do it. But when you take it apart, there's always grease on there, so it's good enough for me. They give you a washer and a lock nut for the front. No cotter pin. Lower control arm next, and that's a new one. I thought for a second that wasn't drilled out, but it's powder coat. The lower is 100 as well. Next I'll put in the strut rod, and the end of it here, the front of it. So it has this little ridge here to ride into the K-frame. But the problem is, the way I see it anyway, is this should be deeper so it makes more contact. You know, I have two cars with these and I've never had a problem with them, but it just seems like if you don't get this in that opening and tighten it down, I don't know, it's just really shallow. So there's where it goes. The thickness of that is definitely deeper than what's on the end of that. When you mount it, this goes straight up and down, this part. So I had a reset. I forgot you need to get the strut bar in the lower control arm as you put the lower control arm on. So I fixed that. Also, this strut bar with that little edge that I talked about, you really got to see it from the other side so you know it's there. It's kind of deceiving. Sometimes it seems it's in, but it's not. And then this has to be vertical, this black part. And then I just torqued it to keep it there because it's like some weird number of 68 foot-pounds or something. But I need it to stay. I need it to stay vertical, and I need it to stay in that hole. So now the fun part comes of making sure this doesn't bind as you lift it up and down. I'll probably take the torsion bar adjuster out so I can make sure it doesn't bind and it stays centered. You gotta have enough of this strut rod sticking through so you can get the nut on. It's actually pretty good. We'll start with that. All right, the goal is to get this lower ball joint into the backing plate here. I'm going to just jack up the lower control arm. I got the shock in, so I'll have to fight with that later. Let's see if we get lucky here. What do you know, it worked. I am a genius. Come on, ratchet. Piece of junk. I just got to torque those to 120 and put the steering arm on. And here is the aftermath. As you can see, the lower control arm pivot bushings are just worn out. It's just worn away, so now it's completely off center. This one is completely shot. I'm sure the ball joints are shot. Upper control arms, I mean, look at how this moves. This one I think is, yeah. This one is just shot. That is not going to help with your suspension and steering. So these are going to the scrapper. Along with this beast. I've pretty much salvaged and sold everything I can possibly get off this, and I want my trailer back. The front suspension is done. It took a little longer than I thought, but turned out well. There's the fancy QA1. I did a rudimentary alignment on it. To recap, QA1 upper and lower control arms and strut rods. I kept the shocks that were on it, and I kept the original drum brakes, which work fine. I replaced the torsion bar, adjusting bolts and brackets underneath, and the eccentric bolts and washers for the upper control arm, and the new power steering. So a couple things of note. This car, same as the Dart, for some reason the steering wheel, when it's straight, is just a bit off center. Now this is how this car was before I did the whole suspension, and as we already covered, there's like a keyway on the steering, and then there's a keyway on the shaft, and you can only put it on a certain way unless you mangle the teeth, which I did not do. Now I did the alignment the same way I did the Barracuda and the Dart. The Barracuda, I did the alignment at home the same way, just by eye, using a tape measure and some string, and I brought it to get aligned, and they had an old school alignment rack, and they said it was dead on, they wouldn't change a thing. So I got lucky on that one. This car goes down the road straight as an arrow. The Dart, I did the same way, and it's got that same just off-center steering. I don't know why. It doesn't really bother me because I kind of lean my arm on the door panel and the armrests and just kind of hold the wheel like this. On this car, it bothers me a little because I can't see the gas gauge like right away when I'm going straight, but that's not really that important. The Fury wagon, the only thing I'm missing is the clock that doesn't work. So I could center the steering wheel on this car and the Dart, but I'd really have to crank out the steering arm on the passenger side, and I don't really want to do that. So I don't know why it ends up this way. All three of these cars have the same exact front suspension, the QA1 stuff. Even the shocks are the same, I believe. The Fury and the Dart have the same power steering pump. I got it from the same place. I don't have any issues with them, really. I noticed the Dart steering is a lot easier. This one's a little, it feels a little tight. The guy I got this from, he said, check the valve. So this is the pressure relief valve I don't know what it's called exactly, but it was fine. There was no debris in it. I swapped out the old one on it just to see. It was fine. He said it could be the pump as well, but this pump worked fine. But then again, this thing was leaking so bad. But it's not terrible. He said I could adjust this thing, and I couldn't find it in the factory service manual, but I kind of understand what he was saying. But I'm just going to drive it for a bit and see how it works out. When I first did the rough alignment on this, I was way off, and it seemed a little stiff, the steering. So when I redid it, I started from scratch and redid it, and it's not as stiff. So I think it's just the suspension. It's not really that noticeable. Like if I didn't have the dart, I wouldn't really notice it. It's just I get really picky with stuff, but we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to run this wagon on these 14-inch wheels for a while until, you know, I kill the tread on them. I restored these Krager GTs, so I cleaned them up, sanded them down, rust primered them, painted them on the back, painted them on the front, clear coated the front, and I was going to put them on the wagon, but I had these on the front of the Dart, and they're just way too skinny. Driving down the highway is just terrible. Driving down just the road is terrible. I do have 15-inch steel rims that accept these larger 10-inch dog dish caps. These caps only came on rims that were 14-inch. I have rear rims that are the same size as the ones on the Dart. It's just the offset is like a 1/4 inch difference. And I have front ones that are 15 by 5.5. So it's a really skinny rim, but I'm gonna see what size tire I can get on that. But that won't happen until spring of next year. This car needs a little bit more work, but we got the front and the rear suspension done. We got the steering done. So we will end it here. Thanks for watching.